It's time for the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast, a podcast so good it doesn't need a name. So without any further ado, here's your host, JD. Take it away, Johnny.
Hello my friends, and welcome to episode 55 of the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast, recorded on August 31st, 2014. I'm your host, JD, aka Gaddick Teague, and in today's episode we're going to talk about conquests. If you've been following me on Twitter, or if you follow GaddickGaming.com, which you should, obviously, you have probably seen my blog on Planetary Conquests and what I think needs to change, so we're going to talk about that here in today's episode. Also, we're going to talk about the future of PvP, PvE, and GSF. I know that's kind of a broad topic, but I'm going to see what I can get out of it. We have an expansion coming up, hopefully this year. It would be incredibly promising if we got 2 expansions to the game added in a span of just 4 months? That would be really cool. I'd love to see that happen. I think that would speak volumes for where the game is right now. With all that being said, let's force leap right in.
Red 2, I've got a topic coming in hot requesting clearance to engage. Lock S-foils and attack positions, you are cleared to discuss.
I spoke a little bit about Conquest last week and how I thought it was the biggest, most important change that no one is talking about that was added in patch 2.9. I definitely still feel this way, but if you read my blog this week, you know that I feel there are several changes that BioWare would be very smart to make. The good thing about Conquest is by its own nature, and just by virtue of it being very compartmentalized, very week to week, they can change things frequently and make these changes to improve how the system works overall. Now that being said, I think it's important for BioWare to tread lightly when making changes to Conquest, especially if you're going to make big sweeping changes, because you end up with things like the whole queuing for naked PvP this week. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this week BioWare decided to nerf down the Flashpoint rewards. This week, very notoriously, had repeatable rewards when it launched for completing the S-list and Black Talon, as well as a couple other Flashpoints that could very easily be soloed by a level 55. Hell, Black Talon and S-list could be soloed probably by someone level 30. And those were giving 1,000 points per completion of the Flashpoint. Many people, even on the SWTOR subreddit, calling it the Battle of Black Talon versus S-list. BioWare took to the forums with Tate Watson posting the quote from Jesse Sky that Conquest events are intended to provide a set of rotating objectives that incentivize a variety of activities from week to week, including both PvP and PvE, but not necessarily a strict balance between the two. Some events will lean more heavily towards specific activities, and others will be more generalized. The intention is to provide a set of high point value, non-repeatable objectives that focus on some specific thematic goals, such as completing certain flashpoints, while giving highly repeatable activities such as war zones and crafting a broader meaning in the war. As this is a new system, we're working out how to create the right balance for the objectives. The purpose is to create a sense of change and opportunity each week, so that the galaxy conflicts feel diverse and interesting. If you favor specific types of activities, you will probably want to gravitate towards invading worlds where those activities receive invasion bonuses in order to maximize your conquest point gain. Generally speaking, however, players who enjoy a variety of activities should get the most out of the system. Now, here's where I agree with BioWare. I think that creating the thematic conquests is actually really interesting. I like the fact that this is the supposedly GSF conquest. The last one, I guess, was PvP. I really don't know. I think that while I like the idea, in theory, of creating thematic conquest events, I don't think they've necessarily branded them well enough to do that. If you're going to make thematic conquest events, I think that you should have thematic rewards at the end of those conquests. So if you have a PvP invasion, then you should give PvP rewards for completing or winning that invasion or getting in the top 10 of that invasion. As far as I can tell, they haven't really done any of that. When you complete your personal conquest, you get the same exact rewards every week, and when you complete your guild conquest, you just get access to the same rewards as far as I can tell. If you're going to have a GSF conquest, then have winning a planet during the GSF conquest give your entire guild some kind of crazy boost to receiving shipwreck that week or for the next month or whatever. however long you want to set it up. If you have a PvP Conquest week, then man, you get double Warzone comms. You basically have a double Warzone comm that week. I think that's fine. I think that works. I think that players have shown in the past that they really like the double Warzone comm weeks, so give it to the players as a reward for completing conquests. Works fine as far as I can tell. Now what I disagree with is how they've actually gone about implementing this change. So they've changed the Flashpoint rewards from being a repeatable thing that you can do as many times as you want or continue to receive rewards into a one-shot deal. So you can do the Flashpoints named, so Essalus, I think Battle of Ilum, Red Reaper maybe, or False Emperor, I think it's False Emperor. You can do those once per week, that's it, out, done. And then you should be able to get the queuing for Flashpoints as long as you have the daily quest up. You should be able to do that as many times as you want. I think someone told me on my website that that's not necessarily the case. I think I tried it out this week and it worked fine, but if it's not working, feel free to let me know. And then it's obviously even worse than what they've done. But as I talked about in my blog, I think it's important for them to avoid creating checklist quests like this. I think it's a bad idea to put things into conquests that make players feel like they need to just check off boxes in the conquests. I think by having these quests only be single one-shot things, A, you make players feel like they have to complete it to get the most out of conquests and help their guild the most that week. So they've made Battle of Ilum and Essalus one-shot deals. Now, even if you don't want to do flashpoints, if you're trying to maximize your effectiveness for conquests, then it behooves you to just go in there and check those boxes off, even if you hate doing flashpoints, if you really don't want to be doing flashpoints. If you're a hardcore PvPer and you want to help out your guild, which is a hardcore PvP guild, why are you directing them to complete these check boxes? Because that's what players want to do. When you have and you give players bars in MMOs, the natural instinct of an MMOer is to check that box off because that's the optimal way of going. The optimal way of playing is to fill up all your bars. You fill up all your stat bars, you fill up your XP bar, fill up all your reputation bars. That's just the innate mindset of an MMOer. What I think Bioware should have done instead is to nerf down the number of points that you get for completing a flashpoint, but still make it a reasonable number. So that players who just want to do flashpoints, they will do flashpoints and still get some kind of reward for it. It doesn't necessarily have to be super competitive, it can be lower and have less of a rate of return than the war zones because this is supposed to be a PvP conquest, or a less rate of return on your conquest points as GSF because it's supposed to be a GSF week. That's fine. It's okay to have optimal paths in these themed conquests, but I still think it's important to reward the players that are doing what they want to do and encourage players to do what they want to do. Because if you try and force players to do what they don't want to do, if you make them do PvP when all they want to do is flashpoints, then they end up resenting the game. They resent the system, they don't want to compete in the system, they stop playing the game. That's obviously not what Bioware should be trying to do. You want to incentivize, at least in some small way, every aspect of the game in conquests, in my opinion. Every week, even in your PvP events. You want players to enjoy playing, to enjoy getting together with their guild. If you are a hardcore PvE guild, and all you want to do is grind out flashpoints, and you want to try and win that way, and you want to get together your guild, and have guild events doing flashpoints, guild events running whatever happens to be the flashpoint of the week that week, that's great, and Bioware should be encouraging that to happen, not disincentivizing it, saying you only get one per week and then you're done, so don't bother getting together for those flashpoint grind runs. No, don't do that. Forget about it. You want to do PvP? It's a PvP week. Why don't you do that? Well, we don't want to do PvP. We want to do flashpoints, and I think that's something Bioware should definitely be aware of. I also dislike Bioware's tactic going 60 to 0 or 0 to 60 on things like this. I think that they've definitely evolved when it comes to class changes. They're willing to do smaller tweaks here and there. They're trying to do things every patch. It seems like they're listening to feedback. They used to have the feast or famine mentality when it came to class changes, but they've moved past that, and I think that they need to do the same thing here. I dislike the, okay, we're going from fully repeatable down to nothing. You get it once per week, that's it. I really had wished that they would go in and tweak down the numbers. Try it out, why not? Just make it not 1,000 points, make it 100 points. Maybe 100 points is the fair value for a Flashpoint. Maybe 50 points or 10 points. I just don't like them saying, in the middle of a conquest, mind you, that, hey, this is no longer what we're intending, bam, it's out, done, no more of it. If instead of just reducing it down to 1 completion per day, if BioWare had said, okay, hey, we're trying something else here, we see how many people are just grinding the S lists, it's too many, we're going to drop down the points. You can still do it if that's what you want to do. If you want to grind out S lists, if you are the PvP guild, go ahead, it's all yours. But we're just going to reduce it down and say 100 and see if that's a fair number. And if it's not a fair number, we reserve the right to change it again. If they had just come out and said, hey, we're looking into doing this, what do you guys think? In the meantime, we're going to reduce it down. Something like that, I think, would have been a more fair way of going about it. I think that just coming out and saying, hey, we're taking this out, we're done with this is no longer, that screams of an old BioWare, the old rigid thinking BioWare that just would take toys away from people, would nerf down classes at a moment's notice. Hey, we don't like Smash anymore, so we're destroying Smash. Hey, you operatives, we hate you. We hate you operatives, so we're kicking you out of the game. That was the old BioWare mentality. I think the new BioWare mentality has moved past that, but I think some of it still lingers, and that's what we're seeing here. So, while I see what they were going for, I don't think they necessarily hit the mark, and I think that there are some changes that need to be made, and some design philosophies regarding conquests that need to be amended. So that's all I wanted to talk about on Conquest this week. I plan on releasing another blog this coming week, about how I would change Conquest Part 2 and Part 1. You can go check that out right now on GadgetGaming.com, and be sure to check out GadgetGaming.com later this week, or you can follow me on Twitter, all of that good stuff, the SWTOR subreddit, where I will post Part 2, where I will talk about guild size. I may have some controversial opinions when it comes to guild size and how it relates to Galactic Conquest. I keep wanting to call it Galactic Conquest, but it's Planetary Conquest, so I apologize if I made that mistake already. But I will have that blog on Planetary Conquest out this week, so keep an eye out. The next topic I will be talking about changes to the game, thanks to an idea given to me by Redna of UtiniCast on Twitter. So stick around and I will be talking about expansion stuff, and who doesn't love speculation. This past week, Redna of UtiniCast fame left me a belated Wall of Crazy topic from my last question that I asked, which was, what would you like to see the Super Secret team, this is the team that worked on Galactic Strongholds and Galactic Starfighter, what would you like to see them work on in the future? And Redna suggests that the next unpaid expansion should incorporate GSF and the ground game with conquest and capital ships for simultaneous goals. Man, that's a hefty and lofty goal right there. And I think it would be a great idea to interweave more aspects of what we already have in the game to make more new, different, interesting things to do in the game. One of the reasons I love Conquest so much is because that it takes what you already have in the game and creates something new and different and unique that really stands out and takes the best parts, and in doing so, they don't really need to make crazy new systems. They take what they already have, they take what's already been designed by other people that's already been in game for a long time, so that the foundation is in place, they just build on top of that and build something new and different. I think that's great because it saves them some work, it saves them time, it allows them to work faster, and it allows them to really innovate on something that's familiar already. We're already familiar with how interactables work, we're familiar with how the basic world of SWTOR works, so when they give us a house and we can play around and actually decorate it ourselves, it seems unique and different, and we know how things look in the game. We know, kind of how they get arranged most of the time, and they give us some freedom into allowing us to do that. I think that's a great part of housing. I think Conquest is great because we know what dailies are, we know what flashpoints are, we know what war zones are, GSF is, all the different conquests we already knew how to do. So they didn't have to teach us something different. They didn't have to hope that players will enjoy doing something new, which is kind of the trap they fell in with GSF. I love GSF. I think it's really cool. I know a lot of people do love GSF, but it's a personal taste thing. Whereas something like Conquests is something they already know players love doing. Players are in-game doing PvP because it incorporates so many aspects of the game. The PvPers, the PvEers, the GSFers, the daily questers, all those people are already invested because it's stuff they were already doing, as I spoke about in the last segment. So I think taking something like GSF, something that a lot of players already enjoy doing, and incorporating that some way with the ground game or with Conquest. Conquests are already super expandable. I've discussed that in last episode a little bit, where they could do plenty of unique different things with Conquest because it's a very open-ended system that just incorporates other parts of the game already. I think that they could do something where they integrate Conquest with GSF so that you're actually attacking a planet or something like that, where you have to take your GSF ships and take out a blockade around a planet, and that's one of the things you have to do for Conquest points. Or where you're integrating GSF in with the ground game in some kind of unique dual threat war zone where it's GSFers in the sky. I've talked about this when GSF first came out and my hopes for GSF in the future. I hope for some kind of raid content, operations content, flashpoint content, group PvE content, I think would be really cool in GSF. And I talked about some kind of integration between GSF and the ground game because when you think about it, that's what Star Wars is all about. When I think Star Wars, I'm thinking the Battle of Endor, where you have people taking out the shield generators on the ground, the giant space battle going on in the skies, and then you have Luke Skywalker fighting Darth Vader with the Emperor right there inside the second Death Star. That's Star Wars to me. The different aspects and different things going on all over. This is something that I think they've kind of tried to do in some parts of the Operations game. There are some bosses in Operations that have players doing some unique things, but I feel like they should double down on that in all aspects of the game. In PvE, I think there should be more bosses where groups have to split up and each one is going to a different place and doing a different thing. In PvP, I think there should be a war zone where players have to split up and make different teams, kind of like how you do it in Void Star, but make the roles a little bit more unique. Maybe that would be frustrating to deal with in a pug group, but I think it would be a nice change of pace to see something where everyone is doing something a little bit different. The war zone is a little bit out of the box. I obviously also like the idea of adding capital ships in with the GSF and the ground game. What if you could do some kind of guild versus guild battle system where you're fighting against the other guild's capital ship? Maybe even add in the simulation type so you can fight against guilds in your own faction. So if your faction is usually all the Empire guilds are winning the conquests, you can have the Empire guilds fight it out against each other and have that count and as part of your conquest of a planet. As of right now, I think SWTOR is in a great place where its feature set goes. I know when the game launched, it was lacking some core key features that needed to be in the game, but I think right now they've done a good job of expanding the game, adding in the GSF, adding in arenas, adding in conquests, things like that, housing. They've done a good job adding that in. So I think now is a good time to sit back and say, okay, how can we connect these dots that are already in the game and make the game better that way? Because if you add too much, you end up adding too many toppings to your ice cream sundae and you can't really taste any of them. It becomes this ice cream soup. There are one or two new systems that I think would be nice and I would like to see added to the game at some point. I think pod racing would be kind of cool. Pod racing could kind of fill the void of like a small 4-player maybe free-for-all PvP type thing. I think that would be really interesting to see, and then obviously I think they could add in some mini games here if they can get Bazak in, Sabak in, something more interesting to make gambling not just a slot machine click off. That would be interesting to me. But overall, I think they're in a spot where they should be focusing more on iterating on what they already have in the game, fixing the problems they have in the game. Worrying about class balance, obviously that should always be happening. Worrying about what rewards players really want, how they really want to go about difficulty. Are nightmare modes even worth dealing with? Are they worth putting out there? Are they doing the job that BioWare wants them to. I don't know. I think that those are things that they could be looking at with the teams that have been working on these secret projects, because the systems they have in game are great. BioWare just needs to put all the puzzle pieces together and make sure it's all lining up properly, and I think now is the prime time to do that. Like when I see on the SWTOR subreddit, SWTOR Miner, saying something like Corellia could be the next housing thing, the next housing planet, next planet where you can get your apartment, I guess is what I'm trying to say there. I don't know what I was trying to say there. But that, to me, that seems like overkill. We have 4 planets where you can get houses right now, and I think players are even overwhelmed with just that. There's a lot to be done in those. I guess this is something new I have to deal with. I don't know if you can hear this, but there are like 4 cop cars outside of my apartment. I really hasn't been a problem when I was at home, but now in New York City, I guess this happens pretty frequently, so I'm sorry if you hear this in the background of episodes. If you've looked at the Tatooine stronghold, there is so much decorating you can do in there. I don't think we need another planet right away. I don't think this is like an operation or a flashpoint or a PvP map. If you just keep adding on top of it, you're just going to overwhelm players even more, and it's not going to get used to its fullest potential. If you're going to worry about putting in something new, worry about putting a new operation, obviously, or a new flashpoint, or a new PvP map. God, the PvPers haven't got a new map in forever. The GSFers, we were told that we were getting the stealth bomber, or the stealth whatever it was, way back when, and then they just canned that for the time being. Why don't we see that? That's where we could use some new stuff. It's already been in the game for so long, and they haven't gotten an update in a while. This is a new, fresh system, and I know that it feels good to, you know, release something and then build on it right away and get right on top of something new, something that has people excited, and you give them something new in that thing right away. I know that sounds good, but I think you're better off bolstering the things that are old, that haven't received updates in a while, because players are only going to stay so long with Galactic Strongholds, and if you overwhelm those players, that's not really going to help you. So I really think BioWare should be taking what's in game right now and seeing how they can make it work with other aspects of the game to make the game better as a whole, to build up the giant pyramid that is SWTOR. And that's what I think Rednet is saying here, that they should have GSF combined with the ground game, with Conquest, capital ships, PvP, PvE, all of that great stuff, put it all together and bake a cake. And that's where BioWare will make its money. It's in that delicious cake that they bake with all those ingredients. And with that, it's time for the Wall of Crazy.
What? That's impossible, even for a computer. It's not impossible. I used to bullseye Womper Rats in my T-16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters.
And this week's Wall of Crazy topic was, what is the #1 issue BioWare needs to address in the next expansion? Got a couple of answers here. Spencer at Dirty Spoon says, I honestly think it's time for some more story content. I know it's a stretch, but it's been 3 years, and I assume he means class story, and yes, I think we all are behind you in saying that class story in the next expansion, while it's not going to happen, will be awesome, and I hope at some point in the future we will get new class story. No matter how much effort it takes, new class story would be great. Everyone would love it. Even if it's a small deal in comparison to the 0 to 50 leveling stories, maybe it's just like a short couple of quests. I think anything they could add to the story content would be great. A lot of people saying that they would just want to see new ops, new PvP, etc., etc., and I think that would be, obviously that's what we'll see in the next expansion, so I guess the problem being addressed there is the lack of any of that in the past few months. So new ops, new PvP, and new GSF, hopefully. Jay Connell at Jay Connell says, subscriber perks that allow subs to grant friends the full subscriber experience for a limited time, and I think this is a great idea. This is something we're seeing even enter into console single-player games. The next Far Cry will have a pass system that you can invite your friends to play, even if they don't own the game, for 0 price. They just get in, they could play the full experience for, I think it's 12 hours, so anything like that would be much appreciated. Some kind of weekend pass system that you can bring your friends in, because games are more fun with your friends, MMOs especially, so it's good for everyone there, I think. And finally, Efkin Elbic at Effie Elbic says, switchable battle poses for lightsaber users. I don't think this is a big deal, but as long as there's an audience for it and someone's going to be liking it, and it's something small like this, something cosmetic, they should obviously put it in the game. And that'll about do it for this week's show. As always, if you'd like to contact me, you can send your questions, comments, and concerns to gaddickteague@gaddickgaming.com, or you can tweet them to @gteague on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes to get your weekly podcast updates. And if you're new to the game or thinking of resubscribing, I provided my refer a friend link in the show notes, so if you'd like a little added incentive to come back, feel free to use it. You can also check out my website, gadgetgaming.com, where I post the blogs like I discussed this episode, also the podcast, and anything else I feel like putting up there. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast. This is JD, signing off.